All right, welcome back to another conversation between women. Hello, Kareen. I know
Hi,
we have a lot
Karen.
of things to do today. So where do
Yeah, if you
you,
want to kick us off, you go for it.
well, okay, I've got something, just kind of an inquiry. I'm kind of curious because things in my life haven't really been intense. Like sometimes they're really intense emotionally dealing with stuff. It hasn't been intense, but there has been a lot of stuff, like little things that I have to deal with. And for anybody who listens to Ann Ortley's astrology podcast, like last week she was talking, I think it was last week, she was talking about um how whatever's happening in the astros is all about children and relationships, right? And I'm definitely seeing those aspects come up, not not in a really intense way, but a really interesting way. So like one really crazy thing that happened is my daughter started swim lessons at the YMCA around here, and the second class that they had, a little boy almost drowned, and his mother had to get in the water and save him because the lifeguard wouldn't get off her fat patush and do anything. And I saw this happening and I flipped my shit, and I was like so emotional about it. You know, obviously there's like 3 and 4 year old kids. This baby is drowning in front of everybody. And so I like went to the lifeguard, who's like a teenage girl, and I like scolded her, and I was like, "What are you doing? Like, this kid is almost drowning." And she says, "I have other things to do," and points to this whole other direction of kids that are at the other end of the pool that she could never save if she even tried. And then I was like, "You have other things to do besides save a drowning child. Then you need to get somebody over here to help you do your job." And she was like, "That's not my job," and like waved me off. And boy, I'll tell you, I was so pissed off. I went and marched my ass right up to the director, and who was like sitting in the office. I actually went to like the secretary lady, and the director happened to be there. And I just like unleashed. I was like, "This child is over there drowning. His mother had to get in the water to save him." And like, this is, just completely went off. And when I was leaving, all these moms were like, "Yeah, we've made several complaints about these swim coaches or whatever, so and nothing is being done." And so when I was walking out, the secretary, she said, "Thank you for saying something, and I really think that you should contact the main office or whatever." And so I was like, okay. And normally my experience, whenever I get like on this kick of like gonna change the system, nothing happens, right? So I was like, I don't know, but this was such a big deal, and I was so emotional about it. Like I was crying when I was talking to this director about this child and was drowning. And so I was like, I'm just gonna do this, and I'm gonna like email the CEO of the Y and like be very, very, very to the point about what I think about this. And so I wrote this like really great email, and ended up sending it to the CEO and like a couple of the other directors, because I was like, I'm telling everybody. And it actually worked out, which is what Ann Ortley was talking about. She was like, now is the time to, like, if you want things to happen, like make them happen or whatever. So that was really cool. So the CEO responds back to me, and she's just like, "I'm so sorry. Like all of this stuff, like the director already called me, and like all this stuff is already changing." And so fast forward now, this was last week or 2 weeks ago, or last, yeah, 2 weeks ago. And so last week, I go back to class with my daughter, and of course everything has changed. The girl who was the lifeguard, who I said should be fired, actually got put as the teacher, as one of the teachers of the kids, which made her, I'm all for like helping people to be their best or whatever, but I really was pissed about this girl because she had a nasty attitude and I wanted her fired. But she ended up being really engaged with the kids, and so I think it was actually a good thing to make her be in the class, because she couldn't just sit up there on the lifeguard thing and like dream about her boyfriend or whatever. And so she was like really engaged. But the interesting thing too is that she was working with my daughter the whole time. So you better believe I was like on her, like watching, and she kept looking at me, and I was just like watching her the whole time, and it was really cool to see my daughter, how she reacted to her, because she let her do, she did a lot of stuff with her. But anytime it came to anything that was really scary, like when she wanted my daughter to jump in the water, my daughter asked for a different teacher, and she wouldn't do it with that woman. So that was pretty cool to see, like, my daughter make that decision herself. And we talked about it a lot for like 2 days, because the way my daughter processes is like a lot of questions. And so we talked about it for a couple days, and I just told her, like, you don't even need to rely on those lifeguards because your parents are going to be there and we're going to save you if something happens. Like, I'm not waiting for a lifeguard to come save you. And if you don't feel comfortable, then, you don't have to do what they say. And so it was just a really interesting experience. And it just lit this thing in me of, yeah, that like the children and like, I don't know, I just had this serious like mama bear like wanting to just tear down the YMCA over this whole thing of just, and I told them, like, you're lucky this wasn't my child that this happened to, because I would like burn this entire institution to the ground. Like, I would be so much more mad than if it was some other person's kid. So yeah, so things like that, things that are really intense but not really directly involving me, like that was somebody else's kid and a situation that I was kind of involved in or put myself involved in because I couldn't not be involved. And especially when I saw no other parents doing anything, like nobody else was complaining or whatever. But yeah, so things like that. And I keep hearing stories from other people about their intense situations, so I'm curious if you're experiencing intensity or anything interesting.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, um what I'm hearing in what you're saying is, well, because of where I'm coming from and what a lot of my stuff that's coming up is around, it's about using your voice and affecting change, or like using, like actively putting yourself into a space that is potentially volatile or potentially like that's not wishy-washy. Like if you go up to the lifeguard or if you go to the director or the CEO or whatever, like, and you insert yourself and you speak your voice into that space, there's no banality around it. Like it's intention and it's going to have a ripple effect. And I feel like for the last, like, I don't know, what's today? Tuesday? Today's Tuesday. As of late last week. No, for about a week-ish, week plus. I've been feeling, what I thought it was feeling a lot of restless transitional energy of the seasons, which has manifested in different ways, like sort of like restless in relationships and irritable, or like just kind of like, there's a lot, like just feeling everything a lot. I have felt much more sensitive, and much like physically much more sensitive, emotionally much more sensitive. Not like I'm having like big emotional outbursts, like I'm not having crying fits or anything like that, but I just feel like, I mean, it's a cool feeling from one perspective, because it feels like layers of numbness have been removed. And so I feel like as a random example, like I used to be able to get mosquito bites. Like I've always gotten mosquito bites. I grew up in the woods. Like it's just a thing. You just get bit by mosquitoes. And I could like totally shut down and be like, I'm not going to touch that. And in 5 minutes, like it was done, and then it would go away. And like, I would have no issues. I wouldn't deal with it at all. Like from a kid even. And in the last little bit here, last few weeks, it's like, oh my God, the mosquito, like maybe for the last couple of months, but it's just a sense of like, I cannot deal with how many mosquito bites I have. They're so itchy. Oh my God, like totally freaking out. Like, and there's other things, like we have brown tail moth here, and like you get this like super crazy itchy rash and stuff, like there are other irritants too, but it's this feeling of like heightened sensitivity in my skin and my body. But then I'm like really excited about it, because at the same time, what that means is that I'm actually just expanding my awareness, heightening my sensitivity overall, because I definitely have a much more heightened energetic sensitivity now. And I'm much more tuned in and finely tuned into the energetics of relationships, into what's happening in the world around me, and to my own energetics. And I've started to like step back from, you know, the third dimensional reality in, especially in those contexts, but like when things happen, you know, like Anne Ortley said, she's like, when I see things happen in the planets, I tend to look at like the global consciousness. And I sort of do that, but like not global consciousness, but I just like will take all the situations that I'm experiencing or that I'm witnessing, and then like step back into the energetics and tune into what's happening and what needs to be expressed or be inserted into a situation or whatever. But yeah, it's funny how she was, she was also saying how there was, or I guess this week, but I experienced this last week, this like, oh, I thought that was going to go differently thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I totally had that. I put myself into a situation thinking like, it's going to be like this. And I was super pumped. And then it was like, that's not actually how that's going to go at all. Yeah. And then like being catapulted into this like whirlwind of like looping trauma-based thought forms, like righteousness and like, and then in that context, like trying to step back and say like, okay, what are the energetics of what I'm experiencing and what is actually going to affect change here? And so that's where the piece about like, it, you know, actively inserting myself into a space or actively expressing my voice, like I'm really conscious of the ripple effects of doing that. And so it feels super intense to me because I can see how I've come to a place in my life where I feel like on the precipice of great potential change. And so I know that all of my actions have consequences. And if I choose to take action now based on like the three-dimensional experience that I'm getting around me, I'm going to just perpetuate the cycles that I've been living out for the last 35 years. But if I step back and I tune in to like a greater awareness around what these circumstances are presenting for me, there's a possibility for like massive growth and a major initiation into like the next phase of my life experience and of my self experience. And yeah, so I feel like that's really intense and also really exciting and awesome. And like, I'm when I hold this, and which is most of the time, I mean, I do have, I think today something got added into the mix. So now I'm like spinning a little bit more in my brain, but I do have this awareness and I'm able to lock into this a lot of the time. And in a lot of my meditations, how I feel like for one of the only times in my life, I'm accessing this place of being able to really step back from everything and coming from like an actually genuine place, not a conceptualized, I get that this is how I should be doing this place, like actually see how all of this is for me. Like all of the seeming shit, all of the like challenges and all the things. Like this morning I did my meditation and I was like, bring it on, universe. Like, I got this. I'm not going down that path. You can't drag me down there, you know? And it was this really cool experience to see, like, thank you so much, all of you participants, for showing up for me like this. Cause like this hurts and it sucks. And I don't like the way this feels. And I don't like the way that I'm like, I don't particularly like this life experience in what it is, like, cause I don't really know what to do with it. And I'm not trying to like step on anybody's toes, but it's just sort of how this whole thing is right now. And at the same time, like, all of you are showing up and playing your roles so that I can become like this over here, this, like, this place that I'm going, this person that I want to become. Like, you're all such blessings and offering such gifts for me to do this. And it's like, I don't know, I'm like speechless about it because it's so amazing. Like, if I could just hold that place, like, I'd be rocking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Like when we can shift that, and it totally takes you out of the victim thing. Like you can't be a victim anymore because you realize it really is for your best good. And two things that it makes me think of, I was thinking about this earlier today. I think it's like a Taoist like story or poem or something like that. I can't remember, but I read this a long time ago about there's a man and some bad circumstance happens to him, and everybody in his village is like, oh man, that's so terrible. And he's like, well, could be good, could be bad. And so this goes on and on, all these bad things keep happening, and he just says could be good, could be bad. And then something really great happens and everybody's like, oh, that's wonderful, you know, like things are turning around. And he says the same thing, could be good, could be bad. And I just love that because we don't know how things are going to turn out, right? Like we have no idea how things are going to turn out. And if we just come from this place of it's all for us, then we can trust that it's gonna, eventually, it may be a rocky road to get there, but eventually it's gonna be for the best. And we hear these stories so many times from people who are like, man, getting fired from my job was the best thing that ever happened to me, you know? And I think that that's probably a lot of people are experiencing things right now that are really horrible. And if we can just, you know, see it through, then we'll find out. Like I know a lot of people who are starting their own businesses right now because of everything that's going on in the world. They can't work for other people, or they're getting laid off or whatever, because of the global situation. And like, what's better than working for yourself? I mean, that's great. Like if everybody could be an entrepreneur. And then and like a real life story that I just heard last night, that is a really kind of an intense story, but also I can see this playing out in it as well. I went to dinner with a friend, and she was saying that she was at a wedding of some friends. And for a long time, it's been clear to me through our conversations that these friends really aren't in alignment with her values, but they're old friends, and she just kind of stays in the relationship. And every time she's with them, she's like has to create more and more boundaries of like, I'm not going to have these conversations. They have very differing views on the world and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, I've told her before, like, eventually you're probably going to grow apart, and you don't have to do anything about that. Just like let things unfold as they will. And you'll probably notice that you're going to be not having a relationship with these people just naturally because you're going to grow apart. Well, so these friends are getting married. It's a male and female couple, or male female couple or whatever, who's getting married. And they had like a wedding shindig before the wedding or whatever a couple weeks ago. And there was this whole thing with, they wanted everybody to get vaccinated before they came to the wedding. And this friend of mine didn't feel comfortable with that. And she told them, she's like, I'll wear a mask, I'll do whatever you want, I understand that, but like, this is my personal belief and I'm not going to do that. And if you're not okay with that, let me know. And so weeks went by, nothing was said or whatever. They said, yeah, just wear a mask or whatever. Well, then they had this wedding shower, and my friend goes with her with her girlfriend who's getting married, and she goes in a car with her to drive down the way to the bar or restaurant wherever they're having this celebration. And the friend, I mean, I want to say she traps her in the car, but the truth is, like, my friend could have gotten out of the car, and she just was not capable mentally of leaving this situation. But this friend of hers started grilling her about like, I want to know why you're not getting the vaccine, da, 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 and starts going on this whole like tangent about like moral and ethical values or whatever. And so my friend just keeps saying, this is a really a personal decision, and I really don't want to have this conversation right now, especially because we've been drinking, but also because like it's my personal decision. And if you don't want me to come to your wedding because of it, just let me know. And her friend says to her, not shitting you, if my 80-year-old grandparents get COVID, I will come to your house and I will slit your throat. That's what she says to her, supposedly one of her best friends. And so my friend was like, wow, okay. Like she had this thing of like, I don't know, like we're not really lining up anymore and maybe we're going to grow apart. And she said that basically for her was like the universe cutting the cord. Like she was just like, I can't have a relationship with a person who literally just threatened to slit my throat. And, so it was really interesting. And, like just seeing her and how she dealt with this, she was like, I literally can't come back from this. Like there's no apology that like will ever make this okay. We can never have a friendship. So she said, it was a really hard slap in the face, but she felt like it was a blessing because it was the universe pretty much doing her job for her. Like she could have left that relationship a long time ago, but the universe is like, no girl, right now it's over. Like rip that band-aid off. So it's interesting because I've heard several stories like this of just people, and a lot of them are surrounded around like the whole COVID thing or whatever. But I honestly just think that COVID is just like this catalyst for so much change that's happening in the world. It's not really about that at all. It's not about the vaccines. It's not about anything. It's just this catalyst to like bring up everybody's shit, right? So everybody has to deal with it. So it's interesting just seeing this happen in so many situations around me. And yeah, like we were saying, that is obviously for her best good to not be in that relationship, because the fact that her supposedly like one of her best friends could say that to her over anything is pretty alarming. And it's abusive, and so it's a good thing to know about somebody you're in a relationship with.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Sometimes I remember being in a relationship in my like mid late 20s and like cycling through some things with the guy I was with, and I don't remember, I have no recollection of what the context was. I just remember where we were standing in the hallway and I said to him like sometimes like I feel like I sometimes need to just get like slapped across the face with something for it to like actually sink in. And it's interesting because like Joe Dispenza says about that kind of situation, he's like, so many people wait for the illness or the accident or the divorce or whatever it is to like wake up to what's happening and to start doing the work to realize that they have to change things in their life. And he's like, so my question is, why wait? Like, why not start living towards your best life now? Like, just make the choice. And I totally get that. Like, why wait? You could have your best life now. Like there's this I think she's Dutch woman who I did a call with last year, and she has I don't know. She does Facebook Lives, like she channels, and it's called Your Best Life Starts Now. And it's like, right, yes, I want my best life to start right now. And I totally think like that is legit and it works. And like, you can just, start living your best life at any point, and you don't have to wait for those slaps across the face from the universe. And at the same time, like what Joe Dispenza also talks about is how the thing that creates like the catalyst for change is a clear intention with an elevated emotion. And I think for a lot of us, it's really hard to drum up the crystal clear intention and the elevated emotion that corresponds until we get that slap across the face from the universe, because it disrupts the humdrum normality of our lives, and it like creates a chasm that suddenly we can see through, and we recognize that we've been like asleep on this train and something has to come into our lives to wake us up. And that's not always the case, but I think that's often the case, because when you are living by so many programs and when you are living by so many outdated thought forms or trauma loops or you know, false beliefs and conclusions from your past, like all these things when you're living by all this, and then your entire reality reinforces that experience because you're creating what you're experiencing internally. Like, of course, it's going to be much more challenging to wake up to the possibilities that are outside of that box and to make a clear intention and feel the corresponding emotions to catalyze like a new way of relating to your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, emotion, energy in motion, right? Like that's how we make all the changes, is like the emotion behind the thought frequency or whatever. Like you have to have something that pushes it forward. And when we're wishy-washy, I remember doing this stuff in my early 20s, well, probably all throughout my 20s, really, like with jobs and stuff, like knowing that I didn't want to be there or I wasn't happy, but just being like, well, da da da, like, and I really needed those catalysts to come in and like shake things up. And I remember a relationship I was in for 5 years, and for the last 2 of the 5 years, I knew I did not want to be in that relationship, but I said, like at the time, he was the nicest man I'd ever met. So I was like, well, I'm not going to leave this until I see there's something better out there. Like, it's just silly for me to do this. Right. And then somebody else came along that interested me, and I left and was pregnant like 30 days later, and like totally changed my whole life. And it was this whole weird thing, but and that guy was not the guy, but like he was the catalyst, and I can acknowledge that. Like he was the catalyst that shifted me out and was like, oh, there's this whole other way of being that I can participate in, and it's okay. Like I'm okay by myself. I don't have to have, because what I was doing was jumping from one male safety net to the next
Mm-hmm.
male safety net, and that was the first time. I mean, I'd never really lived on my own until then. I was like 29, and I'd always lived with roommates. All of them were men, were my partners, which were men. So it was interesting. I definitely always looked for those catalysts. And now I don't so much look for those things because I can see the changes that need to happen. But what I notice about myself now is that I'm much more calculated. So where it used to be, there was the catalyst and I made like these sweeping changes and just like completely, it was just chaos for a while and it was really uncomfortable. Now I can see these things that need to be done, and I also am really content to sit and wait and watch for the right thing that needs to be done. So this is coming up a lot in my relationship now, where, just so many things are getting brought up this last month about our relationship that I'm just like, well, I don't really like that. And also I can at the same time see that like my partner is having a hard time. So he's not his best self, honestly. Like he's acknowledged that several times. But like an example of this is, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I like went on this tangent in my mind. I was just like, what is going on with this man? He is like not being a man. He is being a big wuss about everything. And like, he needs to get over this issue and just like suck it up. And just like, this is the way the world is. I was just going through this whole thing in my mind. Right. And I was trying to figure out like, okay, obviously I'm not going to go to him and be like, suck it up and be a man, but like, that's really how I was feeling. I was feeling like he was being really like wimpy and like not manly, and it was really unattractive. And so I'm going through this in my mind, and then the next day, I think it was, or within the next couple days, he like comes to me, and he has like a hard time speaking up. And so I know now when he wants to say something, he just like comes and sit next to me, and he's like really quiet. And then I'm like, I used to just like drag it out of him. Now I just don't do that. I just wait. And then eventually I'll be like, okay, what is it? And then he'll just like start, dumping this stuff. And so he was having an issue, and I was picking up on that issue. And in the past, I probably would have just like ripped the Band-Aid off and just been like really forceful with like, we have to deal with this now. But now I'm a lot more comfortable to just like sit back and see like how it unfolds, and know that I don't really have to do anything like active. All I have to do is acknowledge like, there's some stuff going on here and I'm not okay with it. And like, for right now, I'm going to like sit with this and see how things transpire, or where the in is for me to like interject myself or to, you know, to ruffle some things up, because a lot of times I do have to do that. Like in my relationship now, I do have to be the one who just goes in there and like messes up his hair, you know, so that he will actually get out of his stuff and just start like going into it. And so now I think I just am learning more when to do that, and when, like, I don't have to do that all the time, you know. There,
Mm-hmm.
so it's more of the nuance, you know, getting
Yeah.
into it and understanding that we can actively assist people around us in dealing with their stuff, just as other people can assist us. But if we can sit back and just like watch what's going on from that further perspective you were talking about, then maybe it'll be a little bit gentler, or maybe it'll be, instead of like messing things up and having to repair it, maybe we'll do the right thing the first time.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, here's like, you're speaking for me right now. I feel like I like that just makes me think of, you know, Hunt Gather Parent. I've mentioned the whole concept where they called her wait a bit in the, I think the Hazabi named her in their language, wait a bit, like just give her daughter like an extra moment, like wait another beat and something else will happen. And I also was making me think of, I think it must have been in Gandhi's autobiography, but he was talking about how that was his path, was like he would go sit for like 2 months and meditate and wait for the like divine inspiration for action, versus like trying to make things happen, going out into the world and insert himself in all these places. It was like waiting and waiting and waiting and listening. And I've been thinking about that lately, because that's also been my process in a lot of ways with my daughter, and also in dealing, well, I guess I kind of feel like everywhere that I'm able to be aware of this, I am practicing this, because which is interesting, because it's also like the waiting is like, the waiting is partly waiting for guidance and like waiting for the inspiration, but it's also, it's like when Joe Dispenza talks about sitting in meditation, and sometimes it will take his body like an hour to settle into the present moment, and you just have to be like, okay, and we're here, okay, and we're here. So it's like it's, for me a lot, it's the process of like waiting until my mind just surrenders to the fact that I'm just in this, and I don't have to fix it, and I don't have to do anything about it. And sometimes that takes days or weeks, you know, sometimes it takes much longer than it feels like the external environment actually allows. And in my experience of the last several months, it does take longer than the external environment actually allows. And so when I am ready and I feel clear and neutral to like enter the space, everybody else is already like on their own timeline with this. And it's like, okay, well, I did my best. Like I wasn't going to jump in before it was my time to jump in, but you know, here I jumped in when I felt aligned, and like chaos ensued, or like it wasn't, I wasn't received in the way that I felt I was offering myself. And so I've been finding that really interesting, because I'm really clear that I don't want to force things. I don't want to try to manipulate anybody else. I don't want to try to speak in a way to have a certain result. Like I just want to be super clear in myself when I step out, and when I insert myself into the world around me, I want to be really clear in myself of who I'm being and what I'm offering. And so I continue to do that, but it does often require waiting longer than I feel I have the allotted time to do so. But then at the same time, it's just trust, because it's like, well, I'm trusting if I continue to align with this, and that's actually who I want to be, and that's actually how I want to live in the world. So I have to trust that ultimately that's going to take me where I want to go, even if the immediate response to that is like, you know, whatever it is, whatever flack or whatever it is, you know, like if it's not received as it's offered, like maybe there's more for me to look at there, but also maybe like I just don't need to worry about the details. And I keep thinking that phrase, you know, the devil's in the details. I'm like, yeah, I think the devil actually, you know, whatever. Like there's that phrase means something. Like that phrase is very valid because it's basically what it's saying is like when you focus on the three dimensions, you get lost in the nitpickies of like, well, but this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. And so I have to figure out how to put all these things together, work with all these things to get this right answer. And it's like, that's never gonna, I mean, it might work in a certain context to a certain extent, but like, if like you're trying to go over there, then that's where you need to put your focus, not like on all these little like chess pieces that you're trying to maneuver in just the right way so that you can checkmate.
Yeah.
So yeah, the waiting piece has been major for me in going through my, just like going through all of my stuff really, because there's been a lot of stuff come up, a lot of thought forms, a lot of emotions. And it's like, okay, like I don't actually have to fix this. I don't have to do anything about this right now. Like I just am experiencing this and it doesn't mean I'm an epic failure and I didn't create all those beautiful changes in my life I thought I changed and in myself. And like, it doesn't mean I'm not, you know, haven't evolved or whatever. It's like, this is the next phase and it's okay. And I'm just here. And it's a big thing for me too, related to this that's come up. Like waiting is one form of creating lots of space. And when we're trying to like just jump in preemptively or prematurely, when we're trying to jump in too fast or move too fast through something, there's not like, it like sucks the air out, it sucks the space out. So there's not as much space for possibilities and for other ways of navigating the experience to unfold. And I keep seeing in my life, like the last few weeks, there's been this, there was a big shift a few weeks ago, and I realized that I had been too much like externally focused, and then feeling like I wasn't getting the input from the external world that I needed. And so then sort of going through these thought loops, like you're saying, like kind of the same thing like you're describing, that like being in that space where you're like, you see the problems, you see all these things that aren't working, and you like want to get in there and do something about them, but recognizing that like that plan, that path isn't actually going to get you the results you want, and that the external environment that is participating in that experience like needs to have space. So like just for me, it was like, I just need to create lots and lots of space around myself, because I also need space for myself. And like the more space that I create, the more space I feel there is, and the more I can breathe deeply, and the more I can relax, and the more I can just allow for whatever is to be what it is, and trust that in that space, something new will be created. It's like if you were, you know, like you were to go out and try to just like plant something in your yard, like that seed's never going to sprout. You know, you can throw seeds out into your yard, but it's got this like really strong growing root spreading grass that's like never going to let anything else land there. And so you clear space so that something else can arise, whether you plant it intentionally or, you know, comes from the wind or whatever. But yeah, just feeling that a lot.
Yeah. Paramahansa Yogananda has this saying. He says, how does it go? He says, in the still waters of the mind, the mooned face of the soul is revealed. And I think about that all the time and I visualize that when I'm meditating, like the still waters of the mind, and then the reflection, or I think it's the reflection, the mooned face of the soul is reflected in the surface of the water. So I think about this all the time. It's that thing, like getting to a point of stillness and just like letting everything settle. And the thing is that most other people in the world that we interact with, they're moving so fast. Like that's not necessarily a good thing, right? So like it's all this false timeline of things have to happen now. And yet if we can just be, if everybody could just be still, things would happen a lot slower, but like probably be a lot better. It's kind
Yeah.
of like when you go, I don't know if you ever went to festivals or anything, but I used to go to a lot of music festivals. And it was always so cool to me because I was always like in a rush, you know, because I lived in the city for so long. And you go to the music festivals and somebody will say, hey, I'm gonna go over here and visit with so and so over on the other end, you want to go with me? And it's like, yeah, sure. And in my mind I would be like, I'll be gone 20-30 minutes or whatever, and it would take half the day to get there because you're like visiting people, and then you're there all night hanging out with those people, and then you have to come back. So it's like a whole day project of going to visit these people in their camp on the other side of the festival, because there's just so many things to do. And it was great for me because that's not like, that was never my natural thing to just like, you know, when I'm going somewhere, I'm going somewhere. It was never my natural thing to like get distracted or whatever. But in festival time, it's like, it was timelessness. So you were going to go see somebody, you had the best intentions to do that, but you also saw like 20 other people on the way, and somebody was making lunch and it was really great. So you stayed there and ate lunch with them. And then before you knew it, you were playing music and like this whole thing unfolded. And so it was like, yeah, the journey, not the destination. And you'd get there eventually, you'd get there. But it was great because I love that because it was, everybody was on the same time wave, like of timelessness, like everybody was in that same space. And so I eventually just learned to just go with it, and that like everybody's doing this, so I'm just going to go with this. And yeah, it was a really great experience for me to have so that I wouldn't be so like regimented and on time to everything.
Mm. Well, one thing I forgot came up in the thing you said before that, um, was I was just thinking, because I just finished knitting the sweater, and it was something that had come up in the like time, attention, space, taking your time thing. And you had said if you do things, like if you slow down and do things more intentionally or do it right the first, like you might get it right the first time. And I had this huge epiphany um, about this sweater, because I started this sweater. I bought the yarn in January. It's now mid-September. I finished knitting it like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, maybe. And it took all those months to knit the sweater that is like by no means a complicated sweater. It's a very simple pattern. It's a very simple structure. Like everything about it is like simple. You read the people on Ravelry, they're like, oh, this is such an easy sweater. I knit it 3 times. And you're like, okay. And it was, I mean, there were a lot of reasons why it took me so long. And a lot of reasons I ripped it out so many times. I ripped out every single piece of this, except maybe one of the sleeves. I ripped out I ripped out parts of it like multiple times. And I had this, and the whole process, like I was aware the whole time I was knitting it. I was like, why is this happening? I was so excited about this sweater. It is driving me crazy now. I don't want to be knitting this anymore, but I really want to have the sweater. And it was this whole thing that whole time. And I finally finished it. And then my boyfriend and I went through like a thing around this whole space thing. And it suddenly like all clicked for me. And I was like, right, this sweater took me a really long time, and I kept having to rip it out because I was like wanting to be done with it and just like knitting it really fast, and then knitting like 40 rows and being like, damn it, I missed that thing back there. And, like having to rip out the whole thing and then knit it again. And I was like, if sometimes you have to rip it out, but if I could start from the beginning with a lot of intention and consciousness and be methodical, or at least be just like present and conscious and aware and intentional about what I was doing, and not try to do it so fast, but just like do it and allow it to unfold. Like maybe I would have only had to rip it out like 1 or 2 times, and that was like, that was such a big learning for me around this, because really that pace that you're describing in the festivals, like maybe it's not so much the intention piece, but just the like slowing down and allowing things to happen like step by step by step by step, instead of saying like, I'm going there, so I'm going to bypass everything else and just go there. And it's like, yeah, I know where I'm going, but I'm going to allow the process of getting there to unfold in its organic and beautiful way, and not try to rush through the process just to get to the destination. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard lesson. Hard lesson to learn.
Oh my God. It is, but it's so, it's like the only lesson though, right? I mean, that is the sage wisdom of all time. Like, you know, that it's not, it's the journey, whatever it is, that it's about the journey, not the destination. And that your entire life, you're not trying to get somewhere, but that's what mainstream society has pushed us to believe, that there's an arrival point, that you're supposed to be getting somewhere. And even in the spiritual realm, I mean, it's this idea of arrive, like I've arrived at my pinnacle of my healing and I'm like healed and now I can be, it's like, no, it's an ever unfolding process, and you would not be living this life if it weren't, you know, like you'd be somewhere else. And so there is no arrival point, but there are ways, like, but the whole process of allowing the journey to unfold and being very present and being very conscious is what allows for the evolution of your soul to take place, so that you're able to actually live those greater levels of freedom and peace and joy and beauty and all that.
Yeah. So something that came to my mind, I just learned this saying, I guess it's Hawaiian, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it's kina ole. And it means I will be in the right place at the right time with the right people and doing the right thing the first time, every time. And I've been thinking about that because it's like, you know, this is why like indigenous languages are so cool, because like one little word means so much, you know. But I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, yeah, how can I do that? How can I be at the right place, the right time, doing the right thing the first time? And it is space. It's all about space. Like just sitting back and allowing space to form, like to empty around you, I guess. And choosing your own adventure instead of just jumping in based on whatever reaction you're programmed for or triggered to do or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Well, and also it's, I feel like the critical piece on the journey towards that is the awareness and recognition that you already are in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing the first time, that there are no missteps. Because the second that you switch your current reality from being like, something is wrong, I did something wrong, somebody else did something wrong, there is a problem here, to everything is exactly what it needs to be for my soul's highest and best growth and evolution, like how we began this, that the universe is working for me. This is a divine and loving intelligence that is benevolent and here in co-creation with me. Like, you get all your power back, and then you are immediately locked in to the perfection of the universe.
Yeah.
So, which is in its own way, like you're immediately creating an abundance of space around you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that like something that I'm like in a really physical sense, something that I'm really diving into right now is like birth and postpartum care and like how the human body works. And that's really how I understand the world, is through the body. Like I've always known that our body is a cell within a cell within a cell. And if I can understand my body, I can understand the universe. And many wise people, like especially in the yoga tradition, say this, like the entire body is inside of you, or entire universe is inside of your body. And so, you know, I've been studying a lot more right now about the pregnant body and how pregnancy works and how babies are born and all of that. And the thing that people don't often understand, because I think a lot of people don't really watch nature, but if you watch nature, you can see this. But it's that nature, or God, whatever we want to call it, but like the natural order of the world is programmed for success. That's the only outcome if we can let it flow the way it's going to flow, like it's the natural outcome. And the way that problems arise, like health issues or babies being born in funky ways, or any kind of that stuff, the way that the problems arise is because something has pushed the blueprint or has inserted itself into this divine matrix that is perfection. And like somebody the other day, I was talking to someone, and it was a man who was talking about how hard it was for his wife to get pregnant because she has endometriosis. And he was talking about endometriosis as if it's like a lifelong death sentence or whatever. And a lot of people do talk about it that way, but a lot of women heal from endometriosis. It's not necessarily like a lifelong thing. And he was saying something, he said something, apparently it's completely natural for women to have these adhesions or whatever, and like to have cysts that like pop all the time on your ovaries. And I was like, actually, it may be common, but it's not normal and it's not natural. And he was offended by that. But the thing is like, people don't understand that like nature would not have programmed you to have pain. Like our menstrual cycles, they're not supposed to be painful. They're painful because something is off. Nature doesn't program us for pain and suffering. That's not the way it is. This is like you said, a loving, supportive universe that wants us to succeed. We are programmed for success. When we don't have success, or when we're having hard times, it's because there's a kink in our hose. Like we need to figure out what the kink is. And we see this in the world around us. And you hear this a lot from like Native American traditional spiritual teachings of learning to live in harmony with the earth. Well, this is part of it, because when we live in harmony with the earth, we're in the natural flow, and all disease disappears when you're in the natural flow. And even when people get some, are born with some sort of ailment or come down with some sort of disease or whatever, there can also be perfection in that. And so like my teacher, Susan Weed, talks about a friend that she has who, I don't remember if it's multiple sclerosis or cerebral palsy, or she has some sort of congenital situation going on that she's in a wheelchair and very physically disabled. But through work with herbs and through getting in alignment with nature, she's been able to become way more high functioning than most other people in her condition. For like, she should be dead right now, but she's like an elderly woman still living with this because she's been able to be in the flow of like the natural rhythm. And so for her, for whatever karma she was born with, she is living in a very healthy state, right? So we also have to change like health is not just the absence of disease, or like spiritual well-being is not the absence of any issues. Like a lot of people think, like you were saying, we're going to get there, we're going to get to this spiritual place and we're going to be there and just be there all the time. But that's not how it works. Like as soon as you get there and you're like, I'm there, then all this stuff starts coming up, that you need to deal with. It's like a never ending journey to healing. And that's what we're here for, is to just do the work that we're presented with. And we all have our own work to do. And all we have to do is figure out what it is we're supposed to be doing and do that. And yeah, there's just, we can limit ourselves in our viewpoint of how things are supposed to be by thinking, when I'm spiritual, I'm never going to get angry again. Or if I'm in perfect health, that means I'm never going to get a flu again, or whatever, like we don't appreciate that sometimes and oftentimes these things are actually that's part of health. Like, right. It's part of like spiritual well-being, is to come up against some rough edges so that we can become these polished stones,
Yeah. I always thought, I always made this connection between when I was a kid and I would play in the orchestra at my school. And my teacher told us that, like, so I grew up in Cleveland, or outside of Cleveland, which has a Cleveland Orchestra. It's like, I think it's recognized as being the best orchestra in the world. Forgive me if that's not true, anyone who knows better. But We always said it was. But and my teacher said like that the reason that they're the world's best musicians is not because they never hit a wrong note. It's because they're so highly and finely attuned that they fix it so fast that you don't even notice. And it's like that they're so on it. And it's like how Joe Dispenza talks about, like, you become so conscious of your unconscious thoughts. Like, you wake up in the morning, you go back to the basics, you wake up in the morning and you say, who am I going to be today? What thoughts am I going to think to draw my future to me? What thoughts am I not going to think? So that, you know, these parts of me that go unconscious, like, I'm going to become so aware of what all those thoughts and feelings are that I'm never going to let myself go unconscious. I'm going to catch them immediately and switch back. And it's like you just become, it's the process of becoming more finely attuned to those things in yourself. And when we have things like a cold comes in, or a disease, or an accident, or whatever, we always have that choice. Like, do I look at it as like, oh, life is just one long slew of this thing after this thing after this thing, or these things happen to me in the victim consciousness or whatever. Or like, you can say, like, what is this showing me? What is this offering me to see about myself so that I can more finely tune this vessel and this, you know, spiritual soul that I am to more align with my truth of who I am and where I'm going. And as Neil Donald Walsh would say, the next, I always mess this up. The next grandest vision of the next greatest version of the grandest idea I ever had about who I am. Basically, like, the best vision you had, like, what's the next level of that, and like aim for that, and then you up level, and then you aim for the next level, and then you aim for the next level, and there's always like another level. I think that's actually, that's what Anami means. I think that's why Kim Anami chose that there's always another level. You can always up level again.
Yeah.
And I think also, like, that's a really important thing to say in the context of like what you're saying about, you know, people get really triggered about the idea, like, you know, that you created your disease, you know, or something like that. But it's really the idea that, like, everything is perfect and everything is an opportunity, and you can live out what you're living out indefinitely if you want to. You also always have a choice to live out something else. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't take a Herculean effort to jump that timeline or to up level in your spiritual growth. It absolutely does, but you always have that choice. And it's also okay for you to just be in whatever experience you're having, and like to fully accept it. And in fully accepting that you have it, that in and of itself is like a spiritual growth, because it's acceptance of what is. It's, you're no longer in resistance, you're no longer fighting. And in that space, you know, you can create all kinds of healing in other ways. Like, maybe you don't ever heal your disease, but it doesn't mean somehow that along the way you didn't find more love in your heart or heal relationships, or, you know, like, there's always stories of people who, you know, like, at the end of their life, they have whatever disease, and it, you know, ravages their body and eventually takes their life. But in the course of that dying process, they come to heal relationships with their siblings, with their children, with their parents, whatever it is, and with themselves ultimately. And so that when they leave this incarnation and they go on to the next, maybe they didn't heal the disease in this lifetime, but they healed all of the underlying causes to such an extent that maybe in the next round or wherever they go after that, they get to have a whole and completely different and new experience.
Yeah.
So we don't always, like, life is not what we experience as 3 dimensions. It's not all there is. There's so much more underlying all of this that we just can't see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I mean, who says that death is not healing, right? Like, that's the thing. People think that death is this finite thing and everybody's afraid of it. And I get it. I mean, I've lost people and it's sad, and it hurts, but ultimately, you know, what I always come back to is, for the people that I've lost, they suffered a great deal physically before they left, but they, like, some of them did get what you're talking about, like this deep spiritual insight, or were able to find peace afterwards. not all of them, but that death is part of it, right? And I think I heard this quote one time that says the only thing between birth and death is who's greeting you on the other side. And I just love that, because it's like, yeah, like we have no idea. I am not conscious of ever dying. So like, I don't know what's on the other side, but I believe people who are way wiser than me when they tell me like what their, their theories, or maybe what they know are that happens. And, um, yeah, like I just don't, I mean, worst comes to worst, you're just not here in this place anymore, which at this point, that might be a really huge blessing for some people. But it is interesting. And people, like, I have somebody that I know who for 2 years has been going through this thing where um, the doctors just didn't, she had all these weird symptoms. The doctors just couldn't figure out what was going on. So over a 2 year period, she's getting diagnosed with all this different stuff. Or not really diagnosed, but hypothetically diagnosed. Well, we think that you have this kind of cancer, or we think that you have heart disease, or we think you have this, so we're going to run these tests. And every time they would tell her this, like, this is what we think, so we're going to send you to this specialist to do this test, she would take on fully, I have heart disease, I have breast cancer, I have whatever. And it was interesting and also really sad to watch her take these things on, because we would be at a group gathering and she would just burst into tears about how she had cancer. And we were like, wait, but do you actually have cancer? And then she'd be like, no, I don't, but da, da, da. And it would just keep happening. And then finally, like, nothing ever got resolved. Nothing has still ever been resolved. She did get some stuff, like some skin cancer stuff, taken off of her head, which was not what was causing all of her issues. And then when it was like, when they did that, she was like, finally the cancer's taken care of. And it's like, what are you talking? Like, it's so weird and confusing. And what I've realized over the time is that this is a person who represses their emotions. So in taking on these sicknesses, it gave her space to express emotion. And she also was still repressing it in places, which is why it would come out at inappropriate times, like at a family dinner or a group gathering or something like that, But it gave her space to express some emotions, even though they weren't emotions that were attached to this actual feeling. And then also it allowed her to put herself in a victim role so that she could get attention that she had never allowed herself to receive before. She had never allowed herself to receive self-care. She had never allowed the people who love her to take care of her. She had never, if this is like a person who, when they were sick, would like tell everybody to leave, like nobody take care of me kind of thing. So this was the first time she was, even if it was in a really unhealthy and like microscopic way, she was allowing people to actually care about her. And it was really sad to watch, but I kind of understand the whole thing. But I've seen so many people do things like this, just fully take on, I'm just, okay, the doctor says this is what's wrong with me. And for a long time, it was hard for me to even understand that, because I'm so the opposite way. Like even when I did used to go to the doctor, when they would tell me that I had some sort of, issue or whatever, I automatically was like, no, I don't think so. Like, I'll show you. And that's just my personality. And that's the work I'm here to do in this world, is to prove that like healing is like our birthright and that we have access to it all the time. But it's very much in the collective culture's mind cloud to just accept what the authority says. And I think one part of that, and we're seeing a lot of it now, I think one part of that is that it's easier to just do what somebody tells you to do for a lot of people. And I know you and I have talked about this before. We wish we could be those people, but like, I mean, I wish for sure, like I could just follow a roadmap, but that's just not my life. So it's easier for people because they can just be like, well, it's easier to be a victim than to like take initiative and take power of your own life, because being responsible for yourself, being responsible for your kid, being responsible for anything is a lot of work. And yeah, I think people just want, especially now, everybody's so stressed out. People just want to like sit back and have somebody else live their life for them, which is really sad because it never really works out for anybody. But yeah.
Well, I think that goes back to the space thing again. Like I have been feeling the last 2 days. I'm also bleeding, and so I get it. Like my energy is really. I've been knocked out way more this time. Well, okay, there's a couple things here, I guess. One is the awareness, like that the way that my cycle has been flowing, I see I have not allowed my body to fully release, and I'm like, because I'm holding, because it's like all of these stressful things that are happening where it's like, but that's not what my intention was. And I, feeling like I'm suddenly unable to express myself in a way that is going to be heard for what my intention is. And then recognizing like I'm trying to then just hold it all myself and like keep it together and like keep on the spiritual path and like do the thing, and I keep doing this, and I realize that I've realized this in related contexts, and this is a life pattern too, something that this amazing experience I'm currently having in my life is opening the door for me to, I think, really to really finally come to the other side of in some way. But the awareness that I keep trying to just like hold it all together myself, because I don't want to get sucked down rabbit holes. And I know that my past tendency is like I could see myself like gossiping and blah, 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 and doing all that and going down a particular way of handling this, or being like, and all these things happen and I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do, spiritual counselor, or like, tell me what to do, housemate, tell me what to do, friend. Like I could take all of those routes, but I don't want to take any of those routes. So I just got to keep going in. So in a way I do have to hold it all myself, but it's not like, but I don't, because you always like the next level is like, okay, source, I give this to you. I'm not holding this all myself. I'm not alone in this. But there's been this piece where I'm like trying to hold on to all of it so my body is not releasing. It's like stifled, and it's like, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting how that's happening. Like, anyway, so the reason all that came up in the context of what you just said is because I feel like all I wanted to do yesterday was just like lay down in the grass. And I did get to for a while, just like put my full body on the earth and just drain into her. And I've been doing that a lot lately, and it helps so much. But what it's doing is it's just like letting go. Like that's the thing about Buddhist meditation. When I started doing that, it was like, there is nothing that I need to do right now. My only purpose right here is to rest. And I remember every time my teacher would say that, I was like, oh, thank God. All I have to do is rest. I don't have to do anything else right now. And I just think so many people aren't aware of that, but don't know that what they need is just that space. Mm-hmm. Because when you have that space, suddenly you don't need somebody to tell you what to do. You want somebody to tell you what to do because you're so overrun in your mental workings that there is no space. And so you're completely done. And you just like, I can't do it anymore. I can't hold this all myself. I can't think for myself. Like, please just tell me what to do. And I totally remember that when my daughter was little, and it was just like month after month after month of the worst eczema and no sleep. And I was just like drowning. And I was like, just somebody tell me what I should be doing right now. Somebody tell me how to fix all these problems, because I cannot fix them myself. And I'm like literally dying right now. That's how it felt. And, I get it. I totally get that. But like, I guess it's also surrender. Like what you need is space, but space is also surrender. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to create space, and I am not going to insert myself in any way. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to surrender to the overwhelm, to this moment, to this energy, whatever it is. Like, surrender to the fact that I just want to not do anything right now, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's something both of my pregnancies have taught me because I had no other choice. Like in the beginning, right at the beginning of both of them, I just got laid out, and it was like, I really got it this time, the surrender piece. I got it in a different way with my daughter. It was much gentler with her, but it just allowing myself to just rest. And, there's so much pressure to do things and, you know, whatever. And for a long time during this pregnancy, I couldn't even get up to feed my child. And so there's a ton of guilt about that. And um, just, yeah, seeing my house go into complete chaos because I can't do the things to help out, to take care of it and all that kind of stuff. But I just really, no matter what, no matter how upset my partner was with me, even though he saw that I was unwell, it still is stressful to have the whole thing put on you. Right. And so even though he would be upset or my daughter would be hungry and crying, and that really made me feel bad, I really had to stay like strong in that of just like, I have to honor what I have to do right now. And I have to like be horizontal, like all day. Like that's what I have to do. And doing that, just, it really gave me a space to see like, okay, when I get past this, what do I want? What do I want this pregnancy to look like? How do I want to feel? And so then I was able to get to this point where it's like, all right, I want to be vital and like vibrant and like feel healthy and like I can do stuff during my pregnancy. I don't want to be somebody who's just laid out all the time. But I could never have gotten to that place if I didn't have the space and just allowed myself to do what I needed to do. And now it's shifted where I still have to rest a lot. But like I talked about this, I think last time, I just, between each thing I do, I just stop, I lay down and I take 10 breaths, and 10 breaths does it, you know, like I take 10 deep breaths and then I can get back up and do the next thing. And I can't just go from one thing to the other like I used to do, you know, when I was, before I ever had kids, just like buzzing around. And the truth is, I don't really ever want to go back to that because it's depleting. Like it's exhausting to just buzz around all the time and, you know, just be a busybody and going from one thing to the other. I would like to really be able to be involved in what I'm doing and then step back from it and realize, like, have an awareness of what I had just accomplished and like, okay, that's great. And so now what I do is whenever I'm feeling guilty or like I'm not productive, I just tell myself like, I created an eyeball today, or I created a whole entire nervous system today. Like I did a lot. Okay. And nobody could see that I did that, but that's what happened. And that makes me feel a little bit better, but yeah, but there's so many things. And I say this all the time that like so much of what we do as women is invisible. Like so much of the work that we do is invisible. There's a lot of emotional work that we have to do, not just for ourselves, but for our kids, for our family, whatever. And it goes unnoticed because it's not like where the dominant culture is at. Like that's not what people notice, the physical, right? Like people aren't tapped into the spiritual or the energetic things that happen. So but I am. So I have to I have to like appreciate that and acknowledge that even if nobody else does. So
Yeah, totally. I'm so there because I've spent the last like nearly 6 years since my daughter was born, like, well, maybe not the whole time, but at a certain point, at a certain age, it was like, okay, like, what is my purpose? What am I doing? Like, this is not it. Just like spending 24/7 with my kid and doing nothing with my life and interacting with no one. Like, there must be more that I'm meant for. And it's interesting to look back now, especially in the context of the last few weeks for me and all the like big changes that have been happening in my life. But to look back and see, like, once again, the universe is working for me and like playing this very long game with me, but realizing that like at some point, I think she was maybe 2, and I got on this call with some healer guy, and he was like, let's get your physical body feeling better, and then you can focus on your purpose. And I was like, no, like it's because I have no spiritual purpose that I feel like this, and what I didn't know and see at the time, like looking back, I see now, like it was this growth, like that is my work, that is my spiritual purpose. Like all of the growth and work that I have had to do and put in to be where I am now and to go where I want to go, seeing like the experiences that I'm drawing into my life now and what I'm wanting to create, like it's all energetics. It's all the subtle layers of work. It's like me and my meditations, me and my intentions every day, me and my consciousness and my awareness, and like the who I'm being and the way that I'm choosing to live as a human being, interacting with others in the world and everything. And just like, it's suddenly becoming clear to me that like this is my purpose. And like, yeah, it might be fun if that manifested in some particular way of like helping others specifically, but like realizing that that's all I'm doing. All I'm doing is working in the energies, like in all of the situations, being like, what is happening here? How is this for me? That like, what do I need to do? What is the universe trying to show me here? And like all of that, that is all healing. That is all healing for me and everyone else that I interact with. And it's like, so much of that work is also to offer healing, or to offer like saying the Ho'oponopono prayer, for instance. Like that's something that's been coming up a lot lately. And like that offering, it's a choice of my energetics and in what I'm giving with it. So anyway, I just totally hear you and align with the fact that like the woman's work is so unseen, but also it's so grounded and it's so vital. And it was really hard for me to really see and experience that up until like the last 2 weeks. And I've struggled with that so much, like, especially in the context of this relationship I'm in now, because the energies that we live out feel very dissonant to me in that way. Like you're talking about like the buzzing, go productivity way. And like, it's brought up all that stuff in me of like, but I just want to lay in the grass. And is that okay? Is that enough? You know, and like, I can't go at that pace, and I don't want to go at that pace, and coming to the place of saying like, I don't have to, and there's no should around going at that pace, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Has been big.
Yeah, for sure. There's this, my teacher says, women are the guardians of the spirit and men are the guardians of the forest. And I always think about that because like that is, I mean, the spirit you don't see, right? Like it's the invisible world. And the men are literally like, their job is to like be dealing with everything worldly or whatever. And you see this in a lot of traditional relationships. Like the women deal with stuff at home, like the inside of the circle, and the men do the stuff out in the world, you know, like go out and do business deals or whatever it is. And I think that that's like that's a manifestation of that, like tending to the outside. And Sam says this about our relationship. He says that I take care of the center and he takes care of the periphery. And it's what works best for me, you know, like, because like you're saying, like I am here to do some serious spiritual work and I like doing it. I want to do it. And when I would take all these like, you know, entrepreneur courses and stuff like that, they're like, all you have to do is find your passion and then like capitalize on it. And I'm like, yeah, except for it's a little bit harder when your passion is like self-improvement. Like when your passion is like your spiritual, like it's harder to figure out how to like make money off of like my spiritual learning or whatever, you know? And I'm starting to get the picture of like what that looks like in this modern context. But in another time, I would just be like a medicine woman and I'd be in my lodge and the community would be taking care of me. And I would be like taking care of me with my physical needs. And I would be taking care of the spiritual needs of the community. And, you know, that can still happen now. It looks differently. There's an exchange of money that has to happen and all that stuff. And, yeah, for a long time, I was just like, I don't think you understand what my purpose is. Like, I don't know how to make money off of this. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm feeling pretty complete, and this baby is like really giving me some stomach trouble. So I think that was a good place to stop for the day. And so we will leave it at that and bid you all adieu. And yeah, thank you for joining us for this conversation between women, and we'll catch you on the next one.